The Finnish research facility, nestled between ancient pine forests and frozen lakes, had never been meant for defense. Its original purpose was climate monitoring and aurora borealis research. Dr. Elena Kuznetsova had chosen this remote location precisely because it offered minimal interference with her sensitive atmospheric equipment. "Another anomalous reading," she muttered, tapping the glass display. For the past 3 days, her instruments had detected unusual electromagnetic fluctuations that matched no known natural phenomenon. Her colleagues had suggested equipment malfunction, but Elena knew better. 20 years of atmospheric research had taught her to trust her instruments and her instincts. Outside, the northern lights danced across the sky in vibrant greens and purples, but tonight they seemed different, more structured, almost geometric. Inside the Zephyrium command vessel, General Kelnar received the disturbing report from his drone technicians. "Impossible," he hissed, his outer membrane changing color with agitation. "No Level 2 civilization has ever detected our reconnaissance technology." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Vikstra, displayed the data across the ship's neural interface. "The evidence is conclusive, General. 4 reconnaissance units completely offline, 3 others showing significant signal degradation." Kelnar moved to the observation portal, staring down at the blue planet. The collective had conquered 2,317 worlds across 7 galaxies, and in all that time, no pre-interstellar species had ever detected their initial surveillance. Their tactics were perfect, tested and refined across millennia of successful conquests. "Show me the location of the failures," he ordered. The neural display zoomed to a seemingly insignificant cluster of buildings surrounded by wilderness, covered in snow. Such a primitive structure should have posed no challenge to their technology. "What makes this facility different?" Kelnar demanded. "Unknown, General," Vikstra replied. "Scans indicate it is primarily a research installation with minimal defensive capabilities. No weapons detected. Population approximately 57 humans." General Kelnar made a decision that would alter the course of both civilizations. "Prepare a strike team. I want samples of their technology and at least 3 living specimens for examination." Back at the facility, Elena rushed down the corridor to the director's office, data tablet in hand. The facility director, a stoic Norwegian named Henrik Larsen, looked up from his desk with mild annoyance. "Dr. Kuznetsova, it's nearly midnight. We're being watched," she interrupted, placing her tablet before him. "Something is in orbit around Earth, deploying smaller objects directly above us." Larsen studied the data, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern. "Even if you're right, what can we possibly do? We're scientists, not soldiers." Elena's eyes gleamed with the intensity that had made her both respected and feared in scientific circles. "We're humans, Director. When have we ever accepted being helpless?" She pulled up a schematic on her tablet, an experimental e-impulse generator she'd been developing on the side. This was designed to create controlled electromagnetic bursts for studying ionospheric reactions, with some modifications. "You want to use it as a weapon?" Larsen asked incredulously. "Not a weapon," Elena corrected. "A flashlight. To show whatever's watching us that we can see them too." As they spoke, the strike team led by Vikstra was already entering Earth's atmosphere, their advanced cloaking technology rendering them invisible to conventional detection. They expected an easy mission against blind, primitive creatures. They had no idea they were about to encounter humanity's greatest defense, our ability to accomplish the impossible when faced with the unknown. The captured alien, Mezzalor, struggled against his restraints as Dr. Kuznetsova circled him cautiously. The holding cell had been hastily repurposed from a cold storage room, its walls now lined with lead and copper mesh, a makeshift Faraday cage, devised by the facility's quick-thinking engineers. "I don't think he can understand us," said Jacob, Elena's research assistant, nervously adjusting his glasses. Elena studied the alien's 6-fingered hands and the strange, pulsing organ visible beneath its translucent cranial dome. Maybe not our words, but he understands plenty. She gestured toward the alien equipment laid out on a stainless steel table. The devices had been carefully removed from Mezzalore during his capture. 3 disc-shaped objects and something resembling a neural interface. Look at how he tracks our examination of the technology. There's intelligence there and concern. Outside the facility, Lieutenant Vikstra gathered her remaining team in the shadow of a towering pine. Their mission parameters had never accounted for losing a squad member, especially not to capture. The collective's tactical simulations had given this primitive species a 0.87% probability of detecting their presence, let alone mounting an effective defense. The High Command must be informed, whispered her weapons specialist. Mezzalore knows too much about our capabilities. Vikstra's outer membrane flickered with patterns of doubt. Requesting reinforcements would be admitting failure against primitives. No commander has faced such disgrace in 7 generations. She activated her long-range scanner, focusing on the facility's interior. We will retrieve Mezzalore ourselves and eliminate any humans who have been exposed to our technology. Inside the lab, Alina had connected one of the alien devices to an isolated computer system. The interface was unlike anything she'd ever seen, but certain principles of technology remained universal. Information had to flow. Energy had to transfer. Patterns had to form. It's like looking at a quantum computer designed by an artist who never learned our rules of physics, she murmured, fingers flying across her keyboard. But there's logic here. Different, but comprehensible. Mezzalore watched with growing alarm as the human female somehow bypassed security protocols that should have been impenetrable to a Level 2 civilization. In his 300 years as an intelligence officer, he had never witnessed such rapid adaptation to collective technology. He activated his emergency subdermal communicator, a last resort measure implanted in all collective officers. The humans are accessing our systems. They should not be capable of this. Their technological assessment requires immediate revision. The facility's newly installed perimeter alarm suddenly blared. Director Larson burst into the lab, face pale. Motion sensors detected something moving at impossible speeds. Security team is not responding. Alina glanced at Mezzalore, whose posture had subtly changed. They're coming for him, she realized. And they'll destroy everything we've learned. She made a split-second decision, disconnecting her computer and gathering the alien devices. We need to move. Now. Move where? Jacob asked, panic edging into his voice. If they can infiltrate a secure facility. They're expecting us to be predictable, Alina said, a determined smile forming on her lips. So let's be unpredictable. Let's go to the last place they'd expect us to take valuable alien technology. Where's that? Alina was already heading for the emergency exit. The sauna. The extreme heat and steam interfere with their optical systems. I figured that out from analyzing their cloaking device. They're adapted to the cold vacuum of space, not a Finnish steam bath. As they rushed through the corridor, Alina couldn't help but wonder if humanity's greatest strength might not be their technology at all, but their capacity to think laterally when faced with impossible odds. Captain Wei Chen's earpiece crackled with urgent reports as his squadron banked sharply around the Oriental Pearl Tower. The iconic structure's metallic sphere glinted in the morning sun, providing momentary cover from the alien vessels in pursuit. Eagle 3, I've got 2 bogies locked on your 6. His wingman warned. We checked his retrofitted radar display. The alien ships moved in perfect tandem, maintaining precise distance from each other, even through evasive maneuvers. That geometric precision had been their squadron's death sentence an hour ago. Now, it was becoming their advantage. Maintain current course, Wei ordered, an idea forming. All units, implement pattern chaos. His pilots responded immediately, breaking formation in seemingly random directions. To an observer, or the aliens' predictive systems, it would appear as disorganized panic. In reality, Each pilot followed a carefully choreographed sequence of movements designed to appear unpredictable while actually creating a tactical position. Below, Shanghai's streets teemed with civilian volunteers coordinating evacuations. College students with megaphones directed families towards subways-turned shelters. Hospital staff wheeled patients through crowded streets as delivery drivers converted their scooters into emergency transport for the elderly. This wasn't in any municipal disaster plan. It was spontaneous, adaptive, and surprisingly effective. Aboard the collective's command vessel, General Kellnar watched the tactical display with growing frustration. "Their aircraft should not be able to evade our targeting systems," he hissed. "Each time we establish a targeting solution, they change course in ways our predictive algorithms cannot anticipate." His tactical officer's epidermis displayed patterns of confusion. The humans appear to be introducing deliberate randomness into their flight patterns. "Our systems are designed to counter logical, optimal, evasive tactics." Kellnar's outer membrane darkened with rage. "Are you suggesting these primitives have identified a weakness in collective military doctrine within hours of first engagement?" Before the officer could respond, the display flashed warnings. 3 collective fighters had collided while pursuing human aircraft through the city's skyline. 7 more were experiencing targeting system failures after humans deployed some form of localized electromagnetic pulse. In the skies above the Huangpu River, Wei Chen saw his opportunity. The alien vessels had regrouped into their characteristic arrow formation. Beautiful, perfect, and utterly predictable. "All units, converge on my position," he ordered. "Prepare to execute Thunderstorm Protocol." His squadron acknowledged, each fighter climbing to a precise altitude before cutting engines momentarily. They dropped like stones through the formation of alien ships, firing their jury-rigged EMP cannons at the precise moment their trajectories intersected with the aliens' formation. The collective vessels, unprepared for attacks from above, suffered catastrophic systems failures. 27 ships plummeted from the sky in perfect formation, maintaining their geometric spacing even in defeat. Wei allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction before radioing command. "Phase 1 complete. Request permission to implement Phase 2. The response came not from military command, but from Dr. Elena Kuznetsova, whose analysis of the captured alien technology had been instrumental in developing their countermeasures. "Captain Chen, intelligence suggests the collective operates on a unified tactical network. Your squadron just created significant electromagnetic interference in their command structure. We're detecting confusion across their fleet." Wei smiled for the first time since the invasion began. "Then we press the advantage while they're disoriented." On the command vessel, General Kellnar made the most difficult decision of his military career. "Order all units to disengage and regroup at Rally Point Omega," he commanded. "We require a full tactical reassessment." His officers stared in shock. Never in recorded history had a collective force retreated during initial planetary engagement. "These humans," Kellnar said quietly, "are not what we thought they were." The underground facility beneath Geneva buzzed with activity as scientists from 37 nations worked around the clock. Originally built as a particle physics laboratory, its reinforced concrete walls now sheltered humanity's best minds as they raced to understand their extraterrestrial adversary. Dr. Elena Kuznetsova studied the holographic display showing Meslor's neural patterns. The alien sat calmly in his specially designed containment chamber, no longer restrained but monitored by sensors that could detect the slightest change in his biochemistry. "Your brain activity is fascinating," she said, adjusting the resolution. "When we first captured you, your neural patterns were almost perfectly symmetrical. Now they're becoming increasingly individualized." Meslor's multifaceted eyes shifted slightly. After weeks of captivity, he had begun to understand human speech patterns through the universal translator the scientists had reverse-engineered from his equipment. "This is considered a grave defect among my kind," he replied, his synthesized voice still mechanical but comprehensible. "The collective values synchronization above all. Individual thought patterns lead to chaos. Dr. Hassan Roman, a Pakistani neurologist, frowned at the readings. Yet your species clearly possesses individual consciousness. Why suppress it? Efficiency, Meslor stated simply. Individual thought created conflict and slowed our evolution. The partial hive mind was our solution, unity without complete loss of self. Elena exchanged glances with her colleagues. This confirmed what they had suspected from analyzing the captured technology. And your ships, your weapons, they all operate on this principle of synchronized consciousness. Yes, it is why we have conquered 7 galaxies in 50,000 years. Meslor said with what almost sounded like pride, before adding, and why your chaotic tactics in Shanghai were so unexpected. 12 levels above them, in a conference room lined with digital maps and tactical displays, military leaders from NATO, China, Russia, and India conducted a rare joint briefing. General Madeleine Winters of the United States pointed to footage of the Shanghai battle. Captain Chen's improvised tactics revealed something crucial about the collective's capabilities. She explained, "Their technology depends on predictable patterns and perfect coordination. When faced with deliberate randomness, their systems falter." Colonel Dmitry Volkov of Russian intelligence nodded. "Our psychological profile suggests they evolved from a high species. They value symmetry and order above all. Chaos is not merely tactically challenging for them. It is psychologically disturbing." In his private quarters aboard the command vessel, General Kellnar reviewed classified historical archives, an act that would be considered treasonous by the Supreme Council. The data streams showed human conflicts spanning thousands of years, each more brutal than the last. How have they not destroyed themselves? He whispered to the empty room. What disturbed him most was not their capacity for violence. The collective had eradicated entire species when necessary, but humanity's extraordinary resilience afterward. These fragile creatures had endured plagues, world wars, nuclear disasters, climate catastrophes, and countless self-inflicted wounds. Yet each time, they emerged stronger, more adaptable, more innovative. The collective simulations had calculated Earth would be subjugated within 14 standard cycles. Now, Kellnar was beginning to suspect this timeline was fatally flawed. His personal AI chimed softly. "General, the Supreme Council demands an update on conquest progress." Kellnar closed the historical archives and composed himself. For the first time in his military career, he contemplated withholding critical information from his superiors. The truth that humans might possess psychological adaptations the collective had engineered out of itself millennia ago was too dangerous to share. "Prepare a standard progress report," he ordered. "Omit the anomalous data from Shanghai." As Kellnar turned to leave, his screen flickered briefly, displaying a quote from a human military strategist named Sun Tzu. "Know thy enemy and know thyself. In 100 battles, you will never be defeated." The devastation across Australia's eastern coast was beyond comprehension. Where Sydney had once stood, a smoldering crater stretched 30 miles wide. The ocean rushed in to fill the void, creating a new, unnatural bay that would forever alter maps of the continent. Millions had perished in seconds when the collective's planet cracker weapon discharged its terrifying power. From his observation deck, General Kellnar watched the aftermath with complex emotions his species rarely experienced. The Supreme Council had overruled his tactical recommendations, choosing instead to demonstrate overwhelming force, a strategy that had subdued countless civilizations before. Behavioral prediction models indicate an 87.6% probability of global surrender negotiations within 3 planetary rotations, his tactical officer reported. Yet something in the data feeds troubled Kellnar deeply. The Council's models failed to account for what he was witnessing across human information networks. Instead of mass panic or capitulation, a different pattern emerged. In New Zealand, now serving as the primary evacuation zone, ordinary citizens opened their homes to Australian refugees. Fishing boats, pleasure craft, and commercial vessels formed a continuous flotilla between the devastated continent and neighboring islands, braving dangerous waters contaminated with alien energy signatures. A kindergarten teacher in Auckland converted her classroom into a shelter for 15 displaced families. An elderly couple in Wellington emptied their retirement savings to purchase medical supplies. A Maori community performed a traditional haka ceremony of strength for the survivors, the powerful rhythmic chants carrying across refugee camps. "General, we're detecting unusual communication patterns," the monitoring officer interrupted. "Thousands of civilian vessels are mobilizing globally. They appear to be converging on Australia from all directions." Kelnar zoomed the observation feed to the Indian Ocean. A massive container ship had been hastily converted into a floating hospital, its deck crowded with medical personnel from 20 different nations. The ship's identification signal had been changed to a simple phrase in multiple languages: "Humanity stands together." "They should be fighting among themselves for resources," Kelnar murmured. "Every conquered species turns inward when faced with extinction." His private terminal chimed with an encrypted alert. The neural link data from Mesolore, now considered a contaminated asset, showed increasingly erratic patterns. The captured intelligence officer was developing unprecedented neural pathways after prolonged exposure to humans. Most disturbing was Mesolore's latest psychological evaluation. When shown footage of the Australia attack, he had displayed emotional responses previously unrecorded in any collective member. Distress at the suffering of another species, and something the monitoring systems couldn't properly categorize. Something like shame. Kelnar's attention was drawn to a live feed from what remained of Melbourne. A rescue worker, his face covered in ash and blood, crawled through a collapsed building. Sensors indicated lethal radiation levels in the area, yet the human pressed forward, finally reaching a small child trapped beneath the rubble. With supreme effort, he freed the young one and carried her to safety before collapsing. Medical drones recorded the man's final life signs terminating shortly after. He had knowingly sacrificed himself for a juvenile not of his genetic line. "Run comparative analysis," Kelnar ordered quietly. "Match this behavior against all conquered species in our historical database." After several moments, the system responded. No equivalent behavioral patterns found. Self-sacrificial actions for non-kin juveniles is not recorded in any collective encounter. For the first time in his 3 centuries of existence, Kelnar felt something dangerous stirring within his consciousness. Doubt about the collective's fundamental understanding of strength. The Supreme Council had always equated power with technological superiority and unified purpose. But here was something different, a strength that grew from connection rather than conformity. "Continue observation," he commanded. "Flag all instances of abnormal cooperative behavior for my personal review." Admiral Sofia Mendez watched from the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains as thousands of civilian vessel indicators blinked across global tracking systems. Each represented an ordinary person who had volunteered for what might well be a suicide mission. "Status report on disruptor distribution," she requested, her voice steady despite the enormity of what they were attempting. Colonel Takashi Yamamoto consulted his tablet. 97% of volunteer vessels have received their payloads. Final deployment groups are launching from Auckland, Cape Town, and Lima. The plan was audacious to the point of madness. Traditional military doctrine would never have conceived it, but this was no traditional war. After Dr. Kuznetsova's team decoded the fundamental weakness in the collective's synchronized consciousness, Admiral Mendez had proposed something unprecedented. A global civilian flotilla carrying small, improvised disruptor devices developed from the technology captured with Mesolore. The collective expects logical attack patterns from military vessels, she had explained to skeptical defense ministers. They'll never anticipate an assault from fishing trawlers, sailboats, and surfboards moving in deliberately illogical patterns. Now that theory was being put to the ultimate test. In the South Pacific, Miguel Sanchez guided his weather-beaten fishing boat directly toward a collective cruiser. The small vessel had sustained his family for 3 generations, plying the waters off Chile in search of tuna. Today, it served a different purpose. 2 minutes to activation range, his daughter Carmen announced, monitoring the jury-rigged tablet connected to the disruptor in their hold. Miguel nodded, keeping his course erratic, speeding up, slowing down, changing direction without pattern. The modifications to his engine had cost a fortune in fuel, but the technicians had been clear. Unpredictability was their only advantage. Similar scenes played out across Earth's oceans. A retired couple from Florida piloted their pleasure yacht in lazy circles. Japanese pearl divers guided submersibles in rapid depth changes. Norwegian oil rig workers repurposed maintenance vessels to execute complex, irrational maneuvers. Aboard the collective's command ship, alarms blared as tactical systems attempted to track the bewildering array of small vessels approaching from all directions. They're employing civilian craft, the tactical officer reported, outer membrane pulsing with confusion. Movement patterns defy strategic logic. Targeting systems cannot establish coherent solutions. Kelnar studied the tactical display with growing unease. They're sacrificing their civilians in a desperate assault. This contradicts all previous behavioral patterns. The vessels carry no conventional weapons, another officer added. Scanning reveals minimal technology signatures. Too late, Kelnar recognized the true nature of the threat. Raise synchronization shields. They've weaponized chaos itself. At precisely the same moment, Admiral Mendez gave the order, activate all disruptors. Across the globe, thousands of civilians pressed the simple activation buttons they'd been given. The disruptors, each no larger than a shoebox, released precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses designed to interfere with the collective's synchronized consciousness network. Aboard the alien vessels, the effect was immediate and devastating. For the first time in their evolutionary history, collective crew members experienced total neural isolation. Millennia of genetic and technological development had left them entirely unprepared for the psychological shock of complete individuality. Miguel watched in awe as the massive ship above him began drifting aimlessly, its perfect geometric formations dissolving into erratic movements. Similar reports flooded in from around the world. Collected vessels losing formation, communications falling silent, coordinated attack patterns disintegrating. "It's working," Carmen whispered, tears streaming down her face. Humanity's disorganized nature, the very thing they thought made us weak, is saving us. In the command center, Admiral Mendez allowed herself a small smile. "Prepare Phase 2, she ordered. "While they're experiencing individuality for the first time, let's show them exactly what individual humans are capable of." Colonel Terrence Wade sat perfectly still in the neural interface chamber, electrodes mapped precisely to his cerebral cortex. Across from him, General Kelnar underwent similar preparations, although the technology attached to his translucent cranium was far more advanced. "You understand the risks?" Dr. Kuznetsova asked Wade one final time. "This connection goes beyond simple communication. Your consciousness will temporarily merge with his." Wade nodded firmly. "If there's any chance this stops the war, the risk is worth it." His eyes drifted to the small holographic image on his wrist display, his daughter Sarah, smiling on her 10th birthday. "Some things are worth any sacrifice." The neural link activated with a soft hum. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then both human and alien gasped simultaneously as the barriers between their minds dissolved. Kelnar experienced sensations entirely foreign to his species. The pure, uncensored emotion of human consciousness flooded through him like a tsunami. Joy, grief, fear, love, hope, all intermingled in chaotic brilliance. He saw Colonel Wade's memories as if they were his own. The exhilarating terror of his first parachute jump, the devastating loss when his wife Emily succumbed to cancer, the indescribable wonder of holding his newborn daughter, the crushing responsibility of command during crisis. More shocking still was experiencing the uniquely human capacity to hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously. Faith despite evidence, hope despite logic, courage despite fear. For Wade, the experience was equally profound. He felt the cold precision of collective thought, the comforting harmony of synchronized consciousness that had guided Kelnar's species for millennia. He understood the evolutionary pressures that had led them to value unity above individuality, the ancient tribal conflicts that had nearly destroyed them before they embraced partial hive consciousness. But beneath this order, Wade sensed something unexpected: loneliness. The collective had sacrificed the chaotic joy of individual experience for the efficiency of unity. They had conquered 7 galaxies, yet lost something fundamental along the way. When the neural link terminated, both participants remained motionless for several minutes. Medical teams monitored their vital signs anxiously, uncertain what damage such unprecedented mental contact might cause. Kelnar was the first to speak, his translator struggling to convey the emotion in his voice. You fight not despite your divisions, but because of them. Each human sees the world differently, thinks differently, yet somehow this strengthens rather than weakens you. Wade nodded slowly. Unity without uniformity. It's messy, inefficient, often painful, but it works for us. Your history is drenched in blood, Kelnar observed. You've nearly destroyed yourselves countless times. And yet we're still here, Wade replied simply. Each crisis forced us to adapt, to find new ways forward. Our disagreements drive our growth. Kelnar rose suddenly, his decision made. Against every protocol, against the most fundamental laws of the collective, he would speak directly to the Supreme Council. What he had experienced in the human's mind could not be properly conveyed through data or reports. Your species considers individual sacrifice for the greater good to be noble, he said as he prepared to leave. My species will consider what I'm about to do to be treason. Wade understood immediately. You're going to tell them the truth about us. Yes, Kelnar confirmed. That what we perceived as your greatest weakness, your chaotic individuality, is actually a form of strength we cannot comprehend, let alone defeat. As Kelnar departed, Wade noticed something extraordinary on the alien's monitoring display. Neural patterns that had once been perfectly symmetrical now showed distinct signs of individualization. The connection had changed the alien in ways neither species had anticipated. The chamber of the Supreme Council gleamed with cold perfection, its crystalline walls reflecting the ancient consciousness of the 12 beings who had guided the collective's expansion for millennia. Their physical forms had evolved beyond recognizable biology, appearing now as luminous geometric patterns suspended in transparent cylinders. Your neural patterns show contamination, General Kelnar. The First Elder's thoughts resonated directly in his mind. The human consciousness has altered your synchronization. Kelnar stood firm despite the implicit threat. I have experienced something our species has forgotten, Elders. The humans possess a strength we cannot measure with our traditional metrics. Irrelevant, the Second Elder dismissed. The reality warping weapon is prepared. Earth will be removed from the timeline, and this anomalous resistance will never have existed. Before Kelnar could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber. A communications officer burst in. A serious breach of council protocol. Forgive the interruption, Elders, but we have a significant development. The contaminated intelligence officer, Meslor, has led a faction of our forces to disable weapon control systems. They're calling themselves the Individualists. On viewing screens throughout the massive ship, footage showed the unprecedented mutiny. Thousands of collective soldiers and officers, all exposed to human prisoners or communication, had broken synchronization. They moved with distinction now, each showing subtle differences in posture and movement that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. This is the infection I warned about, the Third Elder declared. The human consciousness is a virus that spreads individual thought patterns. The chamber doors opened again. Dr. Elena Kuznetsova entered, flanked by Colonel Wade and a delegation of human scientists and diplomats. Their presence in the sacred chamber was unprecedented. We come under a flag of truce, Elena announced, her translator converting her words to the collective's language. and we bring an offer. You have no standing here. The first elder's thought voice reverberated harshly. Wade stepped forward. We understand what's happening to your people after contact with us. We've seen it before in our own history. When radically different cultures meet, both are transformed. We're not here to destroy the collective, Elena continued, but to offer a third path. Our medical team has already begun helping your affected soldiers manage their emerging individuality. We're prepared to extend this assistance to any who need it. The Supreme Council's thought patterns registered shock. Never in the history of their conquests had a species offered assistance to them, particularly not after suffering an attack like Australia had endured. On the main view screen, a transmission from Earth appeared. It showed hospitals where human doctors treated injured collective soldiers. In New Zealand, a makeshift integration center had been established where contaminated aliens learned to cope with their emerging individual consciousness. Why help those who sought to destroy you? The fourth elder asked, genuine confusion evident in its thought pattern. Because that's what makes us human, Wade replied simply. Mislor stepped forward from among the delegation. His neural patterns now showed radical individualization, yet he functioned more effectively than any predicted models would have suggested possible. Elders, I have experienced both existences, our traditional synchronization, and this new individual awareness. Both have value. Both have strength. The humans have shown me that diversity and unity are not opposites, but complementary forces. The chamber fell silent as the council processed this unprecedented situation. Their conquest algorithm had no protocols for an enemy that offered healing instead of retaliation, that welcomed diversity rather than enforcing conformity. Finally, the first elder spoke, its thought voice softer now. In 50,000 years of expansion, we have encountered no species like humanity. Perhaps it is we who have something to learn. And in that moment, the shocking truth became clear to the entire collective. They had encountered not just another species to conquer, but a fundamentally different way of existing that they could neither comprehend nor defeat, a strength born not from perfect unity, but from the beautiful chaos of individual minds working together by choice rather than compulsion.